video, we're going to play around with our natural sea sponge and some masking fluid. So you're going to want a paper towel or a foam plate of some sort to pour your masking fluid out on. So let's get this open, and it's already leaking all over my hands. I'm going to pour out just a wee bit. And then you want to wet or soak your sponge in some water. You want it to be a little wet because you don't want this fluid to stick to it. So you're going to just coat it in the fluid. This still has a little bit of the watercolor in it. I probably should have washed it, but no worries. And I'm just gonna very lightly dab the masking fluid on my piece of paper. So actually it might be a good thing that this sea sponge still had the watercolor in it, because now you can see the masking fluid. I'm going to take just an old brush. I'm going to paint the stem with the masking fluid, and then maybe just some little lines going up, because this is going to be a flower. We're going to let this dry, and then we're going to come back and watercolor over it. All right, let me pull this out just a bit. So this is our masking fluid with the watercolors on it, and it's mostly dry. So I thought we would go ahead and play around. Going to spray down my watercolors, dip my brush in the water. So you can choose what colors you want for your background. I like this turquoise, and obviously you know I like this turquoise because I colored my sea sponge with it. But let me spray this down a little bit more because I want a lot of this watercolor, and I'm just going right over my masking fluid, right over the white. Make sure that I get over the entire thing, because the masking fluid will actually create our white flower, Queen Anne's lace. And once we remove all the masking fluid, you'll be able to see it, how beautiful it is, and we can add a few more details if we want to. I think I'm going to add just a wee bit of green into this, just to give a little bit more contrast. And I would suggest the darker the better. So as I look at this, I realize that my watercolors are actually going to dry a lot lighter. And since we're creating a white flower, I'm thinking that I want to add a lot more watercolor to this. So again, I am doing a mixture of green and turquoise. All right, so I'm just going to set that aside and let it dry, and we'll be back in just a bit. All right, so once this is dry, you can take your fingers and just start rubbing the dried masking fluid off. And you'll see, because we use the sea sponge, it has all these lovely little areas where the blue is still showing through. Let's pull off the stem. Here's some more over here, lest I forget. I'm just taking my finger and rubbing it all over, making sure that I get all the masking fluid off. Isn't that lovely? So maybe you would want to come in with just a wee bit, not a lot of water on your brush, but just tiniest bits of yellow. Queen Anne's lace is white, of course, but just adding a little bit of yellow in here, give this a little bit more depth. I'm just making yellow splotches. You could do the same technique with trees, and then you could come in with green and paint around. And speaking of green, let's go ahead and just grab a little bit of a lighter green. I don't want to paint in the entire stem because I have a green background, so I want it to show up a little bit. In fact, you could work in some green in here as well. Just giving it some more depth. Play around with it and have fun, and that is a sea sponge dipped in masking fluid watercolor resist.